So Thunderfoot has been doing quite a few videos lately aimed at picking on Anita Sarkesian, and let's be honest, you can't really blame him. She practically begs for it, literally in fact. How else will she rake in all that mad dough by conning idiots? But I digress. You can find the links to some of these videos below, and I recommend watching them, but there is one glaring flaw in them I find. He repeatedly quotes this one thing which Anita keeps saying in order to support her argument, but he never calls this particular lie out. Perhaps he didn't think it needed to be addressed, or he just didn't realize how bullshit it was, but for whatever reason he didn't notice it. So I decided I might as well point it out for him, and with that said, well, take it away, Anita.
While it may be comforting to think that we all have a personal force field protecting us from outside influences, this is simply not the case. Scholars sometimes refer to this type of denial as the third-person effect, which is the tendency for people to believe that they are personally immune to media's effects, even if others may be influenced or manipulated. Paradoxically, and somewhat ironically, those who most strongly believe that media is just harmless entertainment are also the ones most likely to uncritically internalize harmful media messages. In short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
No, they don't. Not at all, in fact. They don't refer to it as that because you are pretty much just making shit up. Now, since Anita's going to just lie her narrow little ass off about it, and Thunderfoot either didn't know or didn't bother to call her out on it, I'm going to take the time to do it. You can find the notes and documentation on the third-person effect in the bar below, but I'll give you the brief rundown. In broad terms, the third-person effect postulates that people will generally overestimate the influence that media and mass communication have on the thinking and behavior of others. In other words, that when a person is part of a group that is exposed to mass media, whether or not the media is actually meant to be persuasive in and of itself, that person will expect the communication to have a greater effect on everyone else than it has on themselves. Furthermore, that the impact which they expect the message to have may encourage them to take some sort of action themselves in advance of the perceived effect. As a consequence of this, any effect caused by the communication may actually be due not to the communication itself, but to the behavior of the ones anticipating the disproportionate response. As a notable example, there was a story once about a service unit of black soldiers led by white officers on Iwo Jima Island in the Pacific that was once bombarded from the air by Japanese planes distributing leaflets. The leaflets espoused the theme that this was a white man's war, and the Japanese had no reason to fight the blacks, essentially telling them not to risk their lives for the white man and to either give up or desert as soon as they could. The very next day that unit was withdrawn, meanwhile there was absolutely no evidence that the propaganda had any actual effect on the black soldiers. Apparently, though, it did have quite the profound effect on the army brass. The reason behind my telling this story, aside from the fact that it's kind of a funny story, is that it demonstrates the reason the third-person effect is named as such, because third persons are involved in two different observational standpoints. In the case of the army brass, they were evaluating the effects that it would have on another group of people, that is, the black soldiers, whereas from the standpoint of the propaganda-producing Japanese, i.e. the communicators, the third persons were the people who were concerned about the possible change in behavior of the audience. Whether the Japanese had actually thought the black troops would be affected or not is impossible to guess, but it ultimately didn't matter because the army was so worried that it might have an effect that they withdrew the troops anyways, giving the Japanese exactly what they wanted either way, which perhaps was what their plan actually was. Who really knows? Though there is precedence for this kind of tactic in military strategy. This also comes up in marketing, censorship, and many other aspects of social interaction. Just ask someone who lived in the 50s in America about the Red Scare, and they'll likely have quite a few tales to tell you about how the fear of dissidence and subversion caused people to panic needlessly, simply because of things someone might have said to someone else. Or for that matter, look at religious leaders who insist that the simple act of saying something bad about their holy book or faith, or even having bad thoughts, can cause society to spiral into immorality. It's likely that the third-person effect probably accounts for a depressingly sad percentage of the misery and suffering that humans have caused over the years through their own oppression, or rather, that have been caused by oppressive and oppressive governments over our history. But it should be noted, and I really want this driven in, that the third-person effect is about the effects that are perceived onto third persons, not, as Anita claims, about how one individual perceives themselves, which would be a first-person effect and does not actually exist. Well, there is such a thing called the reverse third-person effect, but that's neither here nor there right now. What makes this truly interesting, though, is not so much that Anita lied. She's a feminist, so that's pretty much to be expected. But it's the nature of the lie that she told. If Anita had invoked the third-person effect correctly, people would have noticed that it very easily and very completely describes the majority of feminist positions and arguments. Anita herself tells us that because people play games where there are naked women, that people will see all women as objects. That having a woman be a damsel in distress will make everyone see all women as weak. In fact, Anita has based her entire sordid career off of using and abusing this hypothesis. I mean, let's be honest here, guys. It's pretty much her home run swing. Yet Anita herself, who claims to have played all of these games for all of these long hours on end, isn't apparently affected. Does she not think that she can be affected?
Paradoxically, and somewhat ironically, those who most strongly believe that media is just harmless entertainment are also the ones most likely to uncritically internalize harmful media messages. In short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
As I said, it's interesting not only that she lies, but how she tells those lies. She took something that specifically indicates that she's a fraud and tried to portray it as something that proves her point. Mind fucking blown. Well played, dumbass. Well played. Now, if you like this, like and subscribe.